We're talking all about lessons learned from serving ultra wealthy individuals and families. And I'm not just talking somebody worth $1 million or $2 million. I'm talking somebody worth well over $10 million, and in some cases, well over $100 million. You don't want to miss today's episode. Hey everyone, this is John Boyd, host of the Emerging Wealth Podcast. Thanks for joining us and making us a part of your week. Before we dive in, if you're finding value in our content, please give us a like. This helps us reach more listeners and share quality financial education. Next, I'd recommend visiting our website at www.modernwealth.com. Head on over to our Learning Center. It's packed with videos and articles designed to help you optimize your wealth. While you're there, consider subscribing to our newsletter. Thanks again for being with us. Now let's dive into this week's episode. Welcome back to another episode of the Emerging Wealth Podcast. Thanks as always for tuning in. We got a fun one in store today. We're talking all about 5 key lessons that I learned serving ultra high net worth individuals and families. So a little background, if you didn't know this already, prior to starting Modern Wealth, I was a lead advisor at one of the largest brokerage firms in the country within their private wealth division. My job specifically was to be the lead financial planner and investment advisor for families and individuals who had a minimum of $5 million in liquid assets under management. I want to really highlight the word liquid because a lot of these folks had tons of real estate or significant equity in a business that wasn't being factored into that $5 million minimum. So I had people maybe have $7 million in liquid assets and things like a brokerage account, an IRA, and so forth, and then maybe have another $13 million in real estate, business ventures, etc. So what I'm trying to get at here is that I was serving very affluent individuals. With some folks, I was serving being worth well over $100 million. And it was a really unique experience. And I got to not only do some, really advanced, financial planning and tax planning for these folks, but I got to get to know these people on a very personal level. I got to see how these people went about their business. And quite frankly, I picked up some lessons from them, right? Because I'm not worth over $100 million. I mean, one day, hopefully, but, I got to really pick up on the habits of some of these very, very wealthy individuals. Because in my opinion, it's one thing to be rich and wealthy. It's another to be crazy wealthy like this. So what were these people doing that I could pick up on? And so that's exactly why we're doing today's video, is that I wanted to go over some of the 5 key lessons and observations that I made. Now, not all of these are going to be about specifically optimizing your personal finances. Some of them are just going to be observations in general regarding finance and the state of the world. So I hope you guys find it interesting. Without further ado, let's dive into it. So lesson number 1 is that equity matters. And I'm not talking about individual stocks or ETFs, right? People no doubt make money on investing in the stock market over long periods of time, right? We've all seen those crazy compound interest charts that people pull out saying, hey, you invest, $1,000 today at a 7% growth rate over 100 years, it's worth $1 bajillion, right? I mean, we've all seen those charts. And there's no doubt people build wealth that way. But how do people become really wealthy? A common theme that I observed from serving ultra high net worth individuals is that they had or currently have significant equity in an asset that just grew at a much more aggressive clip than maybe an average index fund. An example of this is I worked with people who had stock options and equity very early on at some of the very large mega cap tech companies that we all know. Their equity stakes that they had or currently have in these type of companies made them really, really wealthy, right? Obviously risky, right? That they had, in some cases, a lot of their net worth tied up in these businesses. But with the exponential growth of the companies that they were involved with, that made them extremely wealthy. And the reason why I want to point that out is that ownership is extremely valuable, right? That's what made a lot of these wealthy people ultra wealthy, financially speaking, right? Is that they got to have equity stake in something that just grew at a super aggressive clip. And that might sound obvious and a no-brainer, but one reason why I want to highlight that is that folks in the top 1% of the 1%, right? Like the people millionaires look at and think, wow, that person has a lot of money. It isn't necessarily because they had a massive salary of $1 million a year that they could just stack up for decades. I mean, some people get wealthy that way, right? By stacking up a massive amount of W-2 income. Certain medical professionals, for example, or high profile attorneys, for instance, but that's only a portion of these uber wealthy individuals. A lot of them had significant ownership in something and maybe a major liquidity event that helped them get them where they're at. And again, I think that's important to understand, especially for folks who are building wealth, right? A lot of people think, man, I got to get that, next big pay raise so that I'm making, 700, 800K a year, right? Some crazy number. But the reality is that for most people, that's not how they got where they're at, right? It was through ownership in something, which kind of leads to lesson number 2. And that is real estate makes a big difference. Real estate is one of the only legal tax shelters in the United States. And you don't need to be a multimillionaire to get access to it. So for example, a married couple can own their primary residence and then sell that home 20 years down the road, and all that capital appreciation might be completely evaded because there's a 500K capital gains exclusion in the United States. That's significant. Owning real estate also gives you the ability to experience other tax benefits such as depreciation, right? So bottom line is real estate is powerful, right? And that is a form of equity. And that is a common theme that I noticed with a lot of these ultra high net worth families is that almost always they all owned at least their primary residence and in many cases had rental properties to complement it. Now, with all that being said, does that mean that somebody worth well over $10 million or people in this type of wealth demographic are all out here flipping houses and putting every last dollar that they can into real estate? No, of course not, right? Some are, right? Some people do that, but most of them aren't. But bottom line is, these people know how to play the game. In the United States, our tax code incentivizes those who provide jobs and those who provide shelters, aka those who have businesses and those who own real estate get a lot of the unique tax benefits our country has to offer. And if you have the ability to use both, that could potentially really work out in your favor. This is a huge reason why when I work with clients and they don't own their primary residence, I'm a big proponent of trying to help them get there, right? Of course, it makes sense to rent in certain cases, but I think long-term pursuing owning a primary residence is a very powerful step in building long-term wealth. Heck, it's also another reason why if somebody's thinking about selling their current home, I always propose, hey, let's maybe work with a realtor to see how much you could realistically rent this place out. And let's run the numbers to see what it would look like if you were to turn your current home into a rental property and then use maybe savings elsewhere to buy another home. Having equity, right? These first 2 lessons, right? Having equity is important, right? Whether it's equity in your business, equity in a company, equity in your home, in real estate, whatever it is, right? Having equity, ownership makes a big deal over the long run. And that's how a lot of people build wealth. It's not just flat out from having a big salary. Lesson number 3 is there's a balance when it comes to lifestyle spending and savings. The reason why I want to highlight this particular point is I feel that there's 2 primary schools of thought on what someone's budget looks like when they're super wealthy. On one side, you have people that have the vision that someone who is, worth well over $10 million is out here buying Maseratis and buying a crazy lavish mansion with 15 rooms and flying private jets everywhere, right? And they have this crazy lavish lifestyle. And then there's the other school of thought that kind of has that millionaire next door type of profile, right? If you haven't read that book, basically it pushes the idea that people get extremely wealthy through being frugal, and that wealthy people don't spend on flashy clothes or anything like that. Your average super wealthy millionaire is actually shopping at Costco and buying Kirkland jeans and shirts, right? I mean, that's what millionaires are really doing. Well, from my experience working with these individuals, both are inaccurate. I mean, there truly is a balance. I'm not going to sit here and say that wealthy individuals don't have super nice cars or take expensive vacations every now and then. But they also aren't hoarding away every last dollar that comes in and cutting coupons, right? And when you think about it, that's really how your finances should be. There should be balance. A healthy relationship with money should have balance between spending on things that make you happy and putting money away towards the future or the next generation. There's a difference between being frugal and being cheap, right? Being frugal is being intentional with your money and where it goes, right? Frugal person could splurge on vacations and also save a lot because they value saving for the future, but they also value life experiences. Someone who's cheap, is just saving for the sake of savings. There's no purpose, right? So know the difference, right? Super wealthy people are good at knowing the difference between being cheap and being frugal and having that balance. And for anybody that, is listening to this thinking that I was taking a shot at Costco and, the Kirkland jeans shirt section, right? You know what section I'm talking about, right? All Costco's have that like section of the store with like this big table of all this clothes that's laid out, and there's a bunch of Kirkland stuff, right? That's what I was referencing. And if me talking about that rubbed people the wrong way, I don't feel bad, right? I don't think there's a lot of fashionable stuff there, to be honest with you. But that's just me, right? That's just me. I'm not going to judge you if you shop there, right? Because I know they got great deals, but it's just not my style. Just not my style. Maybe if I was shopping for my dad, but not me. Anyway, let's get back on track, as this is not a fashion podcast. So lesson number 4 is that generational wealth and the wealth gap is very real. So I know this topic can get people a little heated, but I'm just going to tell it how it is from what I have observed, not just with my own clients, but the clients of other advisors at firms that I've worked at. A good chunk of folks that are uber wealthy, like, again, I'm talking 10 million plus. A lot of these folks, not all of them, but a good chunk of them inherited a portion of that wealth. Now, I know that directly contradicts some of the Dave Ramsey studies that are out there. I believe it was Dave and his team that have stated something along the lines of 80% of millionaires don't receive an inheritance at all. And to a point, I can see the truth in that, right? If I'm thinking about somebody whose just total net worth is $1 million in a modern world in 2023, right? I could maybe see that. But somebody who is really wealthy, right? We're talking people 10 million, 20 million, $30 million up, and they're older, almost undoubtedly, from my experience and seeing other clients in the wealth management space, there's almost always some sort of inheritance involved. And again, I want to make this crystal clear. I'm not saying that people that have that type of wealth inherit it at all. Not at all. I mean, oftentimes what this would look like is somebody, works their whole career, works extremely hard, is successful, makes a lot of money, and does a lot of the right things financially, and on their own obtains a net worth of, call it $3 million, $4 million. Then eventually that person's parents pass away and they inherit their parents' estate. And if they're married, maybe the spouse does the same thing. Now, all of a sudden, they have inherited a combined estate of $5 million. Now, this person who worked really hard, did all the right things, and was pretty darn wealthy on their own, they didn't need any help getting there, now all of a sudden is crazy wealthy, uber wealthy, right? Not to mention maybe the stock portfolio that they inherited also gets a step up in cost basis, right? So all the unrealized gains of appreciation in that stock portfolio get wiped away. And then the family home that they inherited also gets a step up in basis. So now there's no tax liability if they go sell it right away, right? Again, I've seen this scenario play out a lot. And again, I really want to make it crystal clear that I'm not in the camp of people that say, oh, people that are that wealthy inherited it or they didn't earn it, because that's BS. That's ridiculous. Quite frankly, it pisses me off when I hear people say that. But it's also flat out dumb to say that inheritance don't play a factor into someone becoming ultra crazy stinking wealthy, right? Again, I'm talking the top 1% of the top 1%. Finally, the last lesson that I've learned from working with ultra wealthy individuals is to take calculated risk. Calculated risk is not the same as excessive risk. I've legitimately, no joke, I'm not even exaggerating here, have worked with thousands of clients throughout my career, thousands. I've come across maybe a tiny fraction of clients who've hit it big by buying some penny stock or gambling with options or day trading or Forex trading, right? I mean, all the crazy stuff that people say they make billions of dollars doing, right? I mean, it's a fantasy, right? It is so rare to see somebody like that, right? The reality is that people usually don't become super wealthy by doing those type of things and effectively gambling. The people that I saw make the most amount of money took very calculated risks with career decisions, business ventures, real estate, etc., and they let things play out over the long run. And they were rewarded for taking calculated risk and being patient. And again, let's think about that for a second, right? I mean, people, when they think about real estate investing, right, the idea of owning a rental property that cash flows a little bit every month and having long-term capital appreciation in a property, sure, when you fast forward in 20 years, now all of a sudden that property is cash flowing a lot more and that person's a lot more wealthy because of the value of that real estate. But that takes a long time, right? I mean, that's maybe not as exciting, but the idea of, flipping a home and potentially making a ton of money really quick, right? People get drawn to those type of strategies more. But the reality is that that's just not how most super wealthy people got there. Most people want to get rich, double my net worth in 12 months sort of solution. And the reality is that those type of solutions or strategies really don't exist unless you're going to take excessive risk. And I've seen a lot more people lose money trying to cut corners than make money. So being calculated and strategic with the risks you take, and more importantly, being patient, is probably one of the most important observations that I have made from people who have made it and have made a ton of money during their lives and careers. Them becoming super wealthy was the culmination of, decades in many cases of making the right financial decisions and being disciplined about it. As a reminder, everything on today's podcast was general education only and not deemed to be specific investment, tax, or legal advice. If you need specific guidance, you can reach out to us at www.modernwealth.com. That's modern spelled with no vowels, wealth.com. It's been a lot of fun, guys, and I'll see you next time.